name is Chris Baker with Baker DMM. This is our video digest newsletter. Topic of today's newsletter is going to be serving our client. And before we jump into our discussion, I'll read you a quote. Quote states, "Our brand still represents the foundational concepts of independence, objectivity, high ethical standards, serving our constituents, and protecting the public trust." And that was by Rodney Chandler from the November-December edition of Current Accounts from the Georgia Society of CPAs. And there were a few different areas of that quote that I thought really tied in well to our discussion today, and that is protecting the public trust, serving our constituents, and the concept of independence, because I think all three of those things are very highly illustrated in this example. And we were introduced to this client in late 2015, and we were introduced to him through an elder care attorney in Atlanta. And this gentleman had, for most of his life, he had always handled his own finances and had always been really independent on his own. But he suffered a stroke in 2014, which really just made it almost impossible for him to effectively keep up with day-to-day financial tasks, or what we call daily money management. So we met with him, and even in our first meeting, within the first 5 minutes or so, we were talking about things, and then we would get to a point he would just totally forget everything we were talking about. And you just really feel for this guy, because he's a smart guy, had everything laid out, but just had all the pieces of the puzzle, but just couldn't put it together. So we connected, and we all decided to work together and started putting everything in motion to get his financial world organized and help get everything back on track. And that carried into 2016. We're helping him and even coordinating with other providers. His geriatric care manager, which I believe is now aging life care manager, different medical professionals, therapists, home care providers. This guy really had a big team, helping him, and he still does. So he's very fortunate to have this many people, trying to help him make sense out of somewhat of a chaotic world. And through that, we realized that he had some assets. He had a home that he was no longer living in, and he was renting. He had a tenant in one side of his home, and then on the other side it was vacant. So in connecting with this realtor, we finally were able to get his other component of his home rented out. So he had both units rented, which was great, and it gave him a little bit of extra income. But the problem was that the rental income he was receiving didn't really, in the end, it wasn't covering his mortgage and then the maintenance to upkeep the home. So finally we decided, okay, look, this isn't going to work long term, so we need to sell the home. And he agreed to that. And over time, we working with him in so many different things. There's a lot of trust that's built into that relationship. We're working with this realtor, trying to get handyman to come out to help fix up the home, get it ready for sale. Well, we finally did that by 2017, got the home on the market. And luckily enough, after just a couple months, we had some people interested, and ultimately we found a buyer. And unfortunately, just with the location and the condition of the home and many other variables, the buyer actually got a really great deal. I mean, I think they got a steal, when they purchased the home. And unfortunately, it's one of those things. It's the nature of the real estate. And with our buyer, he knew that, and he just knew that he wouldn't do much better than what that buyer offered. So he ended up selling the home. And we had to get the attorneys involved and real estate attorneys and get everything situated and set up between the real estate agents and the buyer and the seller. And the thing about our client is that he's in his mid-60s, and he is not in a position to really forfeit any money. And and that's really where we come in to help to protect that public trust and to be that and to serve our constituents. And do our best to help this guy retain his independence, because he's going to need every dollar that he can from the sale of this home. And and not to pick on the buyer. The buyer is a real young guy, and and hopefully he's just healthy and living and doing wonderful now, which I'm sure he is. But if you looked at the case, our client would need the money much more than a young, healthy male that's got the whole rest of his life to live and do great things. Whereas our client is never going to have a job again. He's disabled, and he's got very minimal assets and resources. And with his health condition and all of his other issues and all of his other expenses, he's going to need every dollar he can to extend those dollars as much as he can for the rest of his life. And so with that said, we finally get to the closing, and we attended this closing with our client because actually I had been named power of attorney for this gentleman late 2015, early 2016. And so we're there to help represent him. The realtor's there, the buyer's there with his representatives, and then the closing attorney. And so we're, typically for any of you out there who've bought or sold a home, a lot of times closings, last an hour or so. And we're there and we're helping, sign documents and make sure things go as planned, and review the documents, make sure everything looks right. And we get through about an hour or so, and I had another client meeting to attend. And so I talked to the attorneys, talked to the client, talked to the real estate agent, and everybody said, yeah, okay, we're fine, we're good. No surprises, we're almost done. Go ahead and take off and we'll catch up later. We can finish everything without you. So I leave, and sure enough, lo and behold, later that day, I get a phone call and an email from the realtor, a phone call from my client saying that after I had left, just a few minutes after I'd left, there was something had been found, a discrepancy, and that really our client owed the buyer another $500 because of some sort of pet deposit that needed to be refunded. And when we went back and read the agreement, so later on that day, I went back and read the agreement between our client and the renter. And if you read the language, the language didn't say it was a pet deposit that's refundable upon closure of the lease, or anything that happens between the lease and the transition from the seller to a buyer. It just said it was a pet fee. So basically, when we all talked about it, the client, the realtor, and I, we read it as a pet fee that was paid by the tenant to our client at the time that the lease, during at the execution of that lease. So the tenant paid the pet fee, which would go to our client and not the buyer. So basically, everything that we read said that our client, did not have to return that $500 or pay anybody additional $500. So very simply, we all talked about it, we all agreed on it, and then I wrote an email back to the attorney, and I just very politely said, thank you for that, we appreciate it, but we've read all the documents, and we don't see where our client needs to pay the buyer basically another $500. And we exchanged a couple emails, and at first the closing attorney said, well, blah blah blah, this and that, and then again I replied, I'm going to need you to really really directly point out and document and in very clear language explicitly state where does it say that our client would be responsible for paying that money back. And not only did we talk about that explicitly, but then you kind of added on more of a human element to the equation too, because that's a factor. I mean, you have the legal documentation side, you have the financial side, but then you have the human element component side. And I told the guy, I said, listen, our client is in his mid-60s, he's disabled, he has very limited assets and resources, and really in the end, he should not be having to pay this $500, because if we're going to dispute it, go back and forth, number one, your time is going to be much more expensive for your client and who you're representing than what it's worth for $500. Number two, we shouldn't be picking on this guy like that. The buyer already got a great deal, and really what's $500 going to matter to him, And after put that to email together and send it off to these people, to be honest, we never heard from them again. And it's not a huge amount. It's not $5 million, but for our client and his situation, it did mean a lot, and it was worth a lot. And for a lot of people out there, that would mean a lot. And really, it doesn't matter. In the end, the dollar amount. It's the principle. It's the ethical matters. It's sticking up for your constituents. It's honoring the public trust. It's helping people retain their independence a little bit longer. I mean, $500, that's almost a month's worth of rent for this guy at his new home. And so that's why we're here, is to help these people, people that might not otherwise be able to defend themselves, that might possibly get picked on, whether or not it's intentional. And we can serve this role. We can help, be an extra set of eyes and ears and defend these people. And like our client, when he was presented with this at the closing after I left, he told these people, and that's the most wonderful, beautiful thing about it. He said, look, my power of attorney was just here. He left. I don't feel comfortable signing this. I don't feel comfortable paying this amount. Let me talk to him, get his advice, and then we'll circle back to you, which is the most perfect thing anybody could have ever done in that situation, because we did talk about it, and then we just said, no, that's not right, and you're not doing it. And that was the end of that. So, this is a great example of how we help people and tie it into that current accounts quote, which I thought was a nice tie into what we're talking about today. So if you found this information interesting or helpful, please feel free to share it on your social media channels. This could be with your family, your friends, your coworkers, or whoever you think might benefit from viewing the information. If you ever have a question you'd like for me to answer directly in one of our newsletters, go to our website, www.bakerdmm.com. Scroll to the bottom, fill out your information, write a few sentences, and I'll try to answer that in one of our upcoming newsletters. And if you ever like to get my help directly and personally, the quickest and easiest way is to go to our website. At the top of the page, you'll find our phone number as well as a request an appointment button. And if you scroll to the bottom and you'd like to book a phone consulting session, click on the PayPal button, enter your information. And with any of these options, I'll be in touch with you in 24 to 48 hours to schedule our appointment. And until then, I will talk to you all soon.